couple of days. A little bit of snow.
A little bit of snow tomorrow. The real cool stuff Friday.
All right. We'll see you tonight. Now to NBC.
Good evening.
The waiting game goes on. Will Terry Waite deliver the hostages from Lebanon? And West Germany delays the extradition of a suspected terrorist.
NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. Terry Waite, the man who's been representing the Church of England in the hostage negotiations, still has not surfaced in West Beirut, and one of his bodyguards said tonight that Waite now is in a marathon negotiating session with the kidnappers of 2 Americans. That would be Terry Anderson of the Associated Press and Thomas Sutherland of American University in Beirut, hostages for more than a year and a half now. The other Americans are Frank Reed of Massachusetts, Joseph Sicipio of Pennsylvania, and Edward Tracy of Vermont. About a dozen other foreigners also are being held. And the extradition of a suspected terrorist in the hijacking of TWA Flight 847 has been delayed now by the West German government. This on a day when another West German vanished in Beirut. There is also the warning from the PLO that if that suspected terrorist is sent to the U.S. for trial, it would mean a quick death for a West German businessman kidnapped last week. NBC's Brian Stewart tonight on the political and legal dilemma facing the West German government and the U.S.
The government of Chancellor Helmut Kohl now appears to be hesitating about the extradition of Mohammed Hamadi. Only 4 days before a national election, it is facing a major political crisis. Government officials had been predicting that Hamadi would be extradited quickly from this prison to the United States after the U.S. agreed not to ask for the death penalty. But now a second West German has disappeared in Beirut. Alfred Schmidt, an engineer, vanished yesterday near his Beirut hotel. On Saturday, businessman Rudolf Cordes was kidnapped by gunmen near the Beirut airport. West German officials believe the 2 men were taken to prevent Hamadi's extradition. And the government is now stressing that extradition, if it happens, will take time.
We know that the 2 cases are linked, are interlinked, but we have to consider our own responsibility and we have to decide in the appropriate time.
And while officials struggled with the problem through the day, a PLO spokesman cautioned against flying Hamadi to the United States.
It would be very dangerous for Mr. Cordes if Hamadi go outside Germany.
Dangerous as in he might be killed?
I think so.
But the pressure from Washington is also building.
We have a moral obligation to other potential hostages, and that is literally virtually any citizen of our country, or of any country for that matter, not to capitulate to hostage takers, because to do so would only encourage many more incidents and many more threats to human life in the future.
But some West Germans feel that since the disclosure of U.S. arms dealings with Iran, the United States has lost the right to lecture.
What Ronald Reagan did with the Iran arms affair was also a matter of negotiation, right? And in certain instances you have to, I guess.
Just a few days ago, West German officials were bragging about the terrorist big fish they had captured, but now they're afraid they may have caught more than they can handle. Today, they again advised the 200 West Germans still in Lebanon to come home and warned others not to travel there. Brian Stewart, NBC News, Frankfurt.
In this country, the Pentagon announced today that American military installations around the world have been advised to step up their security against a possible terrorist attack. A spokesman said this alert went out on Saturday just in case terrorists tried something as a result of the West German arrest of that suspected hijacker. The White House announced today that President Reagan will meet next Monday with a commission that he has appointed to review the operations of the National Security Council in the wake of the Iran-Contra affair. During an informal White House appearance today, Mrs. Reagan said that her husband is eager to tell his story when the time is right.
Well, I don't think you can get the answers until all the committee reports are in. And he believes that the best way, or the most responsible way, is to wait for those committees to put forth their reports and then say what he has to say. Sometimes, you know, it's harder to sit here and say nothing when you really want to say something.
Mrs. Reagan made her comments today at a White House anti-drug ceremony. Also coming up here tonight on NBC Nightly News, These are real Miami cops on a bus, but Jim Kaczewski reports tonight that the Miami area is now plagued by counterfeit cops using the same tactics to rob homes. And John Hart tonight on a museum tribute to the machine age, when streamlined machines promise a better, brighter future.
Here's Jerry with a new car.
What'd you pay for it?
About $5,500.
Are you kidding?
Does it run on batteries?
What's it made of? Crepe paper?
Does it have a motor? Does it have a motor?
Can I kick the tires?
Will the door come off the hinges?
Hey, guess what? It's a Subaru!
Oh, a Subaru!
Subaru!
Only one inexpensive car is built like a Subaru. Introducing the Subaru Justy. Inexpensive and built to stay that way.
Such a smart boy. Oh. You know, it's funny. Lots of people used to think what made a great raisin bran was just a couple of scoops of raisins. But today, people want more. That's why today's people prefer Post natural raisin bran. Post is different. Look how some raisin brands hide their raisins with sugar, not Post. These beauties are naturally sweet. And taste these crispy wheat and bran flakes. Fantastic. So don't settle for just any raisin bran. Insist on Post natural raisin bran. Today's people prefer Post.
Graduation rehearsal. Wouldn't believe it.
I'm really going to miss you. Did you decide which job to take?
Yeah, I'm going with that subsidiary of Dow. I could actually be helping high-risk heart patients.
Yes, you can make a difference in what tomorrow brings.
You're pretty special.
So are you. Makes you do great things.
The federal government today proposed sweeping drug tests for hundreds of thousands of people, airline pilots, mechanics, train engineers. Transportation Secretary Elizabeth Dole explained people have a right to expect and receive a drug-free transportation system. However, as NBC's Robert Hager reports now, opposition to this testing is already underway.
Following a Pittsburgh grand jury investigation of drug abuse by pilots, news stories such as this one on NBC documenting other cases of pilots on drugs, and word that the Conrail engineer and brakeman involved in this month's railroad accident in Maryland both tested positive for marijuana use, the Department of Transportation today proposed a crackdown on drugs, including random surprise testing. Secretary Elizabeth Dole.
You know, I can't imagine any area where the choice to use drugs could be more disastrous than when you're involved in safety-related positions with our transportation industries.
For airlines, pilots, flight attendants, and mechanics would all be subject to random drug tests. Pilots would also get drug tests during their yearly physicals. This would require a new federal regulation and many months of debate. For railroads, engineers and brakemen would be subject to random tests, but that would require an act of Congress. And air traffic controllers would get random tests. Controllers are federal employees, so this takes only a government order issued today. Unions are opposed. The airline pilots, Henry Duffy.
We are not going to accept random drug testing without a major fight.
The railroad union's Lawrence Mann yesterday.
With respect to random testing, as such, we oppose it on constitutional grounds.
Carl Grundman of the Air Traffic Controllers Association.
It's like proving your loyalty over and over again. It's a loyalty oath of the 80s.
The Air Controllers Association, in an election this spring, is seeking to become the first union in control towers since the 1981 strike. Today's proposal is likely to become an issue in that election. Court challenges are also expected. A judge in New Orleans has already blocked drug tests of customs agents, calling them a gross invasion of privacy. But the Department of Transportation argues when it comes to trains and planes, public safety must override other concerns. Robert Hager, NBC News, Washington.
A recent survey of 1,100 American companies found that most are conducting pre-employment drug tests, but only about half believe that these tests are effective. One reason for this may be a new American growth industry, one dedicated to making sure that these drug tests don't work. NBC's James McCullough has that story.
In Southern California, a $2 phone call will connect you to a recorded message on how to beat a drug test.
Most urine tests look for 7 different types of drugs.
We're making a service available where a person can study for a urine test, believe it or not.
In Portsmouth, Virginia, Joseph Fallhaber is collecting urine from his wife and children. He sells it for $35 a liter. Few questions asked.
We're not in the business to monitor. We're in the business to sell a product, just like Macy's and gimbals and sears and sawbuck.
In Austin, Texas, Jeffrey Nightbird was selling what he calls drug-free urine from a Bible study group for $50 a specimen.
The profile of the persons that are basically interested in this tend to be yuppies. They're in white-collar jobs and they're spot testing, random testing, and they want to secure their future.
Nightbird says more than 200 orders have been shipped. Orders sent to buyers like Dan, a clerk and a recreational user of marijuana, ecstasy, and cocaine.
I had to pay rent. I needed to keep my job, so it's a nice job. I did what I had to. I'm out having fun on a weekend. There's no reason for me to lose my job over it.
Nightbird is now marketing a powdered form of urine for $20 a vial. All you do is add water. The problem for employers is most of these products can be detected only by a sophisticated test. But at $100 a sample, companies say that technique is too expensive. That technique is called mass spectrometry. According to scientists, it is the only testing method accepted by the courts. Many tests for illegal drugs are unreliable, and with the current rash of cheating, it is often hard for employers to know just how accurate test results are. James McCullough, NBC News, Washington.
By an overwhelming vote, 93-6, the Senate late today passed and sent to President Reagan a $20 billion clean water bill. The president vetoed an identical measure to improve the nation's water quality last year, saying that it was just too costly. The White House has not said what Mr. Reagan will do this time around. The American Cancer Society today reported what it called very scary numbers. 1 in every 10 American women will develop breast cancer at some point, and about 1 in 30 of them will die from that disease.
Say, these must be Jack's new Canon personal copiers. Great colors.
Yeah, and they copy in 5. You want to see?
Go ahead, make my day.
Everything you need to copy with is in this replaceable cartridge.
I'll do that.
Good thing Canon has PCs for every personality, even pushy agents.
Lighten up, Jack.
These new Canon personal copiers are light. Put one in my car.
What a guy.
Personal copiers for every personality. For information, call toll-free 1-800-OK-CANON.
Introducing Metaprin when your body hasn't got time for the pain.
I haven't got time for the pain. No, I haven't got time for the pain anymore.
Metaprin has ibuprofen, the prescription ingredient recommended by doctors 2 to 1 over aspirin for body pain, including minor arthritis pain. And it's gentler to your stomach than aspirin.
I haven't got time for the pain.
When your body hasn't got time for the pain, new Metaprin from the makers of Tylenol products.
This is dedicated to the ones we love.
You know what your problem is, Eric?
Alice?
You're 43 years old, and you still eat cold pizza and donuts for breakfast.
So that's it.
All that sugar, all those preservatives.
Hold it. Should I try Nutri-Grain?
Delicious Nutri-Grain, only the whole grain, with no preservatives and no sugar added.
Goodbye.
Oh, wait, does this mean you love me?
Yes.
Kellogg's Nutri-Grain cereal.
Dedicated to the ones we love.
A federal judge in Miami today declared a mistrial in the cocaine and racketeering trial of 7 Miami police officers. Initially, the jury reached guilty verdicts against 2 of the officers on some of the counts, and they were deadlocked on the other 5. However, after a great deal of confusion, it was disclosed that the jury had not been unanimous in the guilty verdicts, and the judge then declared a mistrial. Miami police, in dealing with that city's enormous drug trade, have developed a reputation for toughness. They've been known to break down a door or 2. Now, however, as NBC's Jim Kazurski reports tonight, the police are confronted with a dangerous new problem. They're being imitated.
This kind of break-in is routine in Miami drug raids. Narcotics officers sometimes recover millions of dollars worth of cocaine and hundreds of thousands in cash from the homes of high-living drug dealers. And now criminals posing as police are doing the same thing.
The amount of money that is involved in narcotics transactions makes a narcotics trafficker a prime target for a home invader.
The fake cops can buy authentic-looking badges and official police gear, such as equipment bags, lights, even police cars.
This is sold in the auto trader. It is an old police vehicle that was sold to a dealership along with a number of others.
With police cars and equipment so easy to obtain, fake police are passing for the real thing. long enough to get inside even the most secure home. It happens once a day in Miami, police say, and the imposters can be vicious.
When they'll come in, they'll have the mentality that if they got to shoot it out, they will.
Police raids are always dangerous, and even more so now in Miami because of the police imposters. Police are usually able to persuade suspects to surrender, but in this case, the suspect shot at officers he thought were fakes. The police say that in 90% of home invasions in Miami, the victims are involved in the narcotics trade. But the counterfeit cops, thieves disguised as police, make mistakes.
They grabbed me by the throat and stuck their gun up under my throat, threatened to kill me.
This man and his family were tied up and their home ransacked before thieves realized they had the wrong house.
There's nothing you can do. I'd try to carry a gun with me, you know, to try to protect myself. But if you do that, if they're wanting to hurt you, there's nothing. You're at their mercy.
For now, police don't have an ideal solution to the problem of home invasion. For homeowners, they can recommend only that they call an emergency number to verify that real law officers are knocking at the door. But even the police admit officers, both real and counterfeit, may not give the homeowner time to make a phone call before they start breaking down the door. Jim Kazurski, NBC News, Miami.
The U.S. Parole Commission has turned down a request for a parole from Roy Williams, the former president of the Teamsters Union. Williams, who suffers from emphysema and heart trouble, is serving a 10-year prison term for conspiring to bribe a U.S. senator. Parole also has been denied for former federal judge Harry Claiborne, who is doing 2 years in prison for tax evasion.
Mrs. Walter Payton on Wheaties.
When I told my husband Walter they changed his Wheaties, he acted like a bear. Don't worry, sweetness. They're still low in sugar. All they did was take out 25% of the sodium. They still give you energy you need to pick yourself up on Sunday afternoons. And me, energy to pick up after you on Sunday nights.
Wheaties, yeah, what the big boys eat.
Cute box.
Hello, Dallas. Well, hi, Chicago.
Sounds a little crazy, but we wanted to see if the new fiber optic phone line in the system being built by U.S. Sprint really was so incredibly quiet that you could actually hear a pin drop.
You got it? Loud and clear. That was a pin?
So call now. Find out more and save with U.S. Sprint, where every fiber optic call sounds like you're right next door.
Minwax makes wood beautiful.
Minwax brings out wood's rich, warm glow, so it's as beautiful to look at as it is to touch. Wood finish by Minwax penetrates deep into wood, so it's easy to get outstanding results. And when topped with our own polyurethane, Minwax protects against life's hard knocks and tough spills, letting wood's natural beauty show through.
Minwax makes wood beautiful.
The federal government reported today that the 1986 inflation rate for consumer prices in this country was only 1 1/10%. That's the lowest inflation rate since 1961. The key factor was a sharp drop in prices for oil and other forms of energy, but the White House says it does expect the inflation rate this year to approach about 4%. For this country's trading partners, the big question tonight is the shrinking U.S. dollar. Will it continue to shrink, to drop? Or will there steps be taken to stabilize it? That's what's being discussed tonight by top finance officials of the United States and Japan. And as NBC's chief financial correspondent Mike Jensen reports now, there is a lot riding on their answers.
Finance Minister Kiichi Miyazawa leaving Japan for his meeting in Washington with U.S. Treasury Secretary James Baker to address the problem of a plunging dollar. On money exchanges like this one in Tokyo, the dollar has been falling dramatically against currencies like the yen. Also in Frankfurt, against the mark. In February of 1985, $1 was worth 261 yen. This month, only 151, a decline of 42% for the dollar. Same thing with the West German mark. In February of '85, $1 was worth 3.47 marks. This month, only 1.81, a decline of 48% for the dollar. German companies are afraid that with a weak dollar, Americans won't buy as many of their products.
We expect
profit squeeze in export-oriented sectors this year.
Japan is worried about jobs for its workers. A weak dollar means fewer Americans will buy Japanese autos. And both the Japanese and the Germans count on exports to keep their factories busy. Last year, those two countries exported $139 billion more in goods than they imported. The U.S. exported $175 billion less than it imported. The imports included a lot of cars from Germany and Japan. But now, with a weaker dollar, imported cars cost more. So do imported TV sets and stereos.
In the past year, we've received price increases from the Japanese manufacturers ranging from 5 to as high as 20%.
Treasury Secretary Baker spent part of the day in Canada with Vice President Bush talking about trade before his meeting in Washington with Miyazawa.
Mr. Finance Minister, what do you want Secretary Baker to do?
Miyazawa had little to say to reporters as he arrived in Washington. But as his meeting with Secretary Baker began, he was expected to ask for help in stopping what for Japan is a devastating slide in the dollar. Mike Jensen, NBC News, New York.
Will Rogers used to say that he belonged to no organized political party. He was, he said, a Democrat. But now another party is showing signs of disorganization. And that is the subject of John Chancellor's commentary tonight. John?
Tom, you may not have been sitting on the edge of your chair for the last week wondering if Patrick J. Buchanan would run for president, and the news that he won't run, at least for now, may not leave you breathless. But Buchanan's decision does tell us something important about the Republican Party today. Buchanan is one of the most articulate, some would say outrageous, speakers among the conservative, some would say radical Republicans. He says he won't run because if he did that, that would be a death blow to Congressman Jack Kemp's conservative campaign for the Republican nomination. Mr. Buchanan obviously is not troubled by humility, but he has a point. Kemp's standing in the polls is weak. So conservatives have been talking about Buchanan, Jean Kirkpatrick, and the Reverend Pat Robertson. Where does that leave mainstream Republicans like Bob Dole, Howard Baker, and George Bush? Why are the conservatives thinking of running for president people who have never even been elected to anything? Buchanan, Kirkpatrick, and Robertson? The answer is that Dole, Baker, and Bush are not conservative enough for the conservatives. Even Jack Kemp is suspect. I once asked an important conservative what he thought of Kemp, and he said, "Oh, he's just a Republican." It's a sight to see. The Republicans have held the White House for 2 terms. Until recently, they've had the most popular president in years. But instead of getting together for a tough fight with the Democrats next year, the Republicans are getting ready for a tough fight among themselves, between the mainstreamers and the conservatives. And the attention given to Pat Buchanan this past week is a good illustration of that party disunity, which is commentary for this evening, Tom.
Thanks, John. This is the time of the year when we get the list, you know, the 10 best, the 10 worst, the 10 whatever. Well, Rochester, New York man J.D. Stewart heads International Dull Folks Unlimited. And today he published his list of the 10 dullest Americans. David Letterman is number 1. The list also includes Ann Landers and Pee Wee Herman. And this guy. Stewart says that Tom always looks as if he's ready to snooze with the news. I wanted to ask my co-workers if they agreed, but before I could finish the question, they dozed off.
Do you know someone who's feeling a little down? Send them an FTD pick-me-up bouquet. Its flowers, rainbow coffee mug, and tote bag are the perfect way to get them feeling back on solid ground again. And only your FTD florist has it.
For 25 years, the name Skylark has stood for a very special kind of Buick. Smaller than a full-size Buick, highly advanced, but always very much a Buick. Today, with front-wheel drive, electronic instrumentation, and comfortable room for 5, Skylark sedan is no exception. Buick Skylark, it has a tradition of being untraditional. Buick, where better really matters.
I'm Bryant Gumbel. Tomorrow morning on today's Super Bowl, quarterbacks John Elway and Phil Simms.
I'm Jane Foley, also Marvin Hamlish, Skitch Henderson, and the Forrester sisters.
Tomorrow morning on Today.
My son recommended Preparation H for my hemorrhoids. Why should I listen to a kid? Because that kid is also a doctor.
In a national survey, 2 out of 3 doctors named Preparation H among the hemorrhoid remedies they recommended to their patients in the past year. It often relieves pain and itching for hours, helps shrink swelling of inflamed hemorrhoidal tissue, and soothes painful irritation.
My son is very careful about what he recommends.
Preparation H, recommended by 2 out of 3 doctors.
Doctors know best.
It's time to change your light bulb. Philips Longer Life Square bulbs last 33% longer than ordinary round bulbs.
In this age of technology, satellites, personal computers, microwave ovens, and so on, there is a lesson to be learned from the machine age. That's the name of a surprisingly popular exhibition at the Brooklyn Museum, a celebration of the dazzling new shapes of the 20s and 30s. As NBC's John Hart tells us tonight, it was also an age of innocence.
Buck Rogers in the wonderful world of the future. A world that sees a lot of our scientific and mechanical dreams come true.
With old radios and their programs. With old cars and their lines. With old dreams of a future made endlessly better by ever more wonderful machines. The Brooklyn Museum is celebrating the machine age of the 1920s and 30s. Those were the years when 90% of America got electricity, when power was good and more power better. When skyscrapers thrilled us with the message that we could always reach higher, and chairs imitated skyscrapers so as to catch the rising spirit of the age. These things remind us of how wary we've become of our future in the nuclear age, of how there was a time when the future could only be better and we couldn't get there fast enough. The 1935 Chrysler was designed so that air wouldn't slow it down, to cut through the air stream. Streamlining became the signature of a good future.
Americans really desperately were looking for a symbol to represent America, and streamlining became that symbol.
In everything, from staplers to pencil sharpeners, outboard motors to irons, cameras to water pitchers. The Oscar, designed in the late 20s, was streamlined, a man of the future, a symbol of the highest reward for fantasy. Fantasy ships were fantastically streamlined and never built. Real desks were streamlined by Frank Lloyd Wright and never comfortable. The public has thronged the exhibit and amazed co-curator Diane Pilgrim.
Seems to have struck a nerve with people and all ages. And I do think it is this really longing for an innocent time.
Not everyone was innocent. Grant Wood painted danger ahead, and the joy of the machine age did end as the nuclear age began.
After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I don't think you can think about the machine in the same way ever again.
Next month, the exhibit will begin a year-long journey to Pittsburgh, Los Angeles, and then Atlanta. More than a sentimental one, a stirring of old machine dreams from a time when we would often say, what'll they think of next? And not be afraid of the answer. John Hart, NBC News, Brooklyn, New York.
That's Nightly News for this Wednesday night. I'm Tom Brokaw. I'll see you tomorrow night.
Tonight on Highway to Heaven, can Jonathan reunite a stubborn preacher with her daughter?
She cannot do this to the Lord!
Are you angry at your daughter because she's left the Lord or because she left you?
Then it's a special 1 hour, give me a break.
What a good idea.
And things are shaking when Matt starts rocking and rolling.
Don't knock it till you try it. Tonight.